All right, cool. We're live. How's it going, everybody? I'm Chris Powell, the editor of Megavisions, and with me today is Rob Duenas, our cover artist extraordinaire. How's it going, man?
Pretty good. I'm the voice. I'm the voice out there. That's my little picture down there. I just let the art speak for me, That's what I
That's all you
do.
need, man.
hmm
That's awesome. So we just, or I guess, showcased the Ruffy cover that you did a couple days ago. I think it was yesterday, actually, and we got a lot of great response to it on social media and on our Kickstarter. So we thought that we would kind of take you through the creation of that up to this point, and Rob's going to be able to go in and talk about some of his kind of inspiration and how he's working this cover. And so we have a video that we're going to be able to showcase to you. This is almost kind of like an artist commentary of sorts, right?
Yeah, I guess in a way, right? So you can watch some of this in real time, and then I'll jump around if we need to for time. But yeah, I'll definitely walk you through like how we concepted it, the creation, and then we'll just see where it goes from there. I'm pretty certain it'll be interesting for those that find how things are made.
I'm
Worthwhile.
absolutely really looking forward to it too, just because I was a huge fan of the cover of what you've done so far. Uh, I'm just a huge fan of Toe Jam and Earl from back in the day. I absolutely love that series. It's really important for me just because I have a lot of fond memories of it. Hanging out with my cousins, my brother, playing those games together. And it really means a lot to me to be able to put that into a magazine now, working with Greg Johnson, the series creator, and now just kind of seeing your artwork kind of grow onto the pages of Megavisions is something awesome. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Because everyone puts Toe Jam and Earl on a cover.
I
Right?
want to know when the last time Toe Jam and Earl was on a cover of a video game.
I'll get into that discussion. I've been there a few different times. So let me just go ahead and just really quickly, if you could see the layout. This is Photoshop I use. I do everything in Photoshop, other than InDesign or Acrobat, like when I publish. But if I'm drawing, it's in Photoshop. I'm just very familiar with the program.
Mm-hmm.
And this right here is the Megavisions logo. I did a quick resizing of it back when we were first concepting out ideas for the covers. And then if you see, this is my little background template I use for my little moniker, SketchCraft. It's my YouTube channel and everything else I do. But there's these little black lines. This sort of represents basically the trim on your iPad space. So there's
Mm-hmm.
really no because iPad is flush, there's no cut, right?
Right.
There's no gutter in the case of printing where you'd have this extra bleed over that would get cut off. On the iPad, that's just basically where that stuff would go.
Mm-hmm.
So this way, while I'm designing it, I can build for an 11 by 17 print, which is what this dimension is, and simultaneously crop the image. I know the characters are going to fit on the iPad and not be trimmed off in any way. So
Oh, that sounds good.
I'll just hit play really quick. But yeah, so my work process is very simple. First, I talk to the client like yourself and your cohorts over at Secondaries, and we all I get told what to draw, and then I go cry. And then you guys are like, what about Toe Jam and Earl? And I'm like, great, So I was like, I remember that game where it was like the characters were really small and there was a giant background. But I think it's important if you have an understanding of the games or the subject material to know what strikes you when you first see it. And the environment in Toe Jam and Earl was one of the first things that struck me back when I was a kid. The characters were cool, but the game was very free roaming.
Yeah.
As you played it. So I wanted to make certain that the background fit it. That being said, the main game mostly had a space background, mostly because of the limitations of the Genesis at the time. It was one of those first or 1.5 year games, like year 1.5. And so I was looking at some of the other games as well because they sort of elaborated.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, sure. They built out Funkatron, the planet, right? And
Right. Yeah.
subsequent games, and so I don't look at the modern Kickstarter version because this is a retro title, so I'm looking at the older games. Plus, you never know if those Kickstarters will go horribly wrong, right? Kickstarter.
We'll hope not.
No. But what games, they could do it wrong. So you want to focus on the era, So I was looking
totally.
at the Funkatron game, and I liked that it had these giant flower environments and these crystalline towers. So I wanted to mix that as the base here. with these 3D platforming levels from the first game. So you can see that there's just different levels. Maybe the first game was up here and the third game is closer to the ground is kind of the basic idea.
No, that's cool, man. That was one of the coolest parts that I noticed about the cover is that you included some of the different levels because even as a kid, it's something that I thought was just really neat that you're just kind of going on layer over layer of the actual game. And just from a kind of a design and how he built it standpoint, I thought that was a really neat way to kind of implement some of the different levels. And that, you know, if you fell down a ledge, it'd take you down to the previous level, which is pretty interesting. I hadn't seen a game do that before.
There was one piece of, because I do look around sometimes to see what people have done, so I'm not retreading too much. Someone did do a piece of art that features some of the backgrounds, a bit like that for Toe Jam and Earl back in the day. I don't know when, maybe a few years ago. But it didn't really feel like the game to me. It just kind of looked like a big drawing. So I don't know. I like the mood. When it comes to art, especially covers, I think atmosphere is really important. Yeah. Beyond just trying to draw the characters and a bunch of stuff from the game, which I've done in the past. But when you get an environment, and, you know, you get that sense of atmosphere and tone, even if it's a simple drawing, you know, it sits up on your wall and you go, man, that takes me back to going to that place, you know, that game. So this right here is me just sort of sketching in some of these levels using this perspective. I've done it before in a couple different other sketchies, but they were based on a 2-point perspective. And this is kind of like a dynamic fisheye 1-point. This is where you can see the horizon line somewhere around here technically, but you can see sort of like below and above. So it's somewhere around here. And then I'm drawing through these little pillars to give them depth.
Yeah.
And I try to get the background done before I block in the characters. Because if you draw giant characters and then try to cram in a background, I don't know, man. Like you can, you can end up into some serious. The characters can be so big because this looks tiny, but it's actually quite a large area.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense for sure. So what tools are you using for when you're drawing this?
Right now, I'm just using a basic hard round brush in Photoshop. Like there's no, it's full opacity, full flow. Yeah, so it's just a flat round brush. And I'm drawing at about 300 dpi, so it's a bit more resolution than you have, but it scales to the same. How do I say this? Like I'm drawing at print resolution, but it scales to your digital resolution.
Right. Okay.
Accurately. And I like to work at about this zoomed out level, so the resolution is based on the zoom. So I know that this I can see the whole piece at once. Versus you don't want to be sketching and be like suckered into, you know, one little piece here and zoomed so far in that you can't see what's going on.
It's impressive that you're just able to create this just with the brush tool, just to have that level of precision with it. I cannot do that. Well,
it does help having, like, if you have a Wacom tablet or something pressure sensitive, you know, you get more than just like a mouse click.
Yeah.
But you do get like a sixth sense, like a feeling for it. So I'm technically drawing in the center. When you apply less pressure, you can feel the center of the brush. Like, even though it's virtual, it's like all in your head, you know, you can feel the center. And then as you press out, you can feel it go toward the edge if I want a big blob of something. But this process came from, you know, when I was in the, I spent a lot of time growing up drawing. I took a sabbatical and joined the army from life. I was like, I'll just go away, you know, like, and I was like, I'll use that as a time to learn how to draw because no one can bother me, and I'll just have some probably, you know, I took a job doing tanks. I'll just go do my job and draw. And this was before we were at war, so everyone
had time to hang out and learn a new craft, right?
Yeah, and I always hated drawing with stick figures. It felt like I was drawing like a bunch of lines to get to the figure. Like you draw a stick figure and then you have to build muscles. Like we call it an additive method. Like imagine if you're sculpting and you had like usually when they build like a sculpture, they build something called an armature, which is like a little skeleton made of wire.
Yeah, I've seen those before.
And then they'll take blocks of clay and put them on top and build up. Well, when I did sculpture in high school or, you know, even for fun, I would start with like a can of Play-Doh. Like that would be my cheap version of clay because I was poor. And I would just pull away things, you know, And so I would kept thinking like maybe I just see things differently, because every time I tried drawing with the stick figure, my characters would look flat and they would go weird, and they feel like these weird rag dolls, like these dead, limp puppets.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
started with Sharpies drawing shapes. Like if I drew the silhouette of Superman flying, like you ever see the comic The Dark Knight Returns?
Yeah.
So there's this whole sequence in the 4th issue where Superman's basically a silhouette with just a symbol, a Superman symbol. And that got me thinking when I was a kid, like, oh, wow, what if I can see Superman? There's nothing being drawn. So I started drawing silhouettes of characters, and then I could put a big blob in front of another blob, and that would be the hand coming towards you. But all I did was draw a blob. And then
Right.
I would take a piece of tracing paper and go over that blob, you know what I mean? And fill in the shapes. Like I can look and go, oh, okay, cool. I can see where this would go here. And my mind started to see. And that's how this whole process is based on that way of drawing.
That's pretty cool. That's an interesting way to do it. I've never heard of kind of taking that method, but I mean, obviously your stuff looks badass.
I also think it's helpful too, like, you know, when you or anyone else commission something, that they can see like an idea what this is actually going to be, you know, like for reals, not like you kind of hope there's a. I did 10 years in clothing, like men's apparel, t-shirts and stuff. And one of the things I noticed when I first got to an art department, it's like 2004, 2005, was that people would sketch their ideas for t-shirts in pencil in little thumbnail boxes. They'd tell them, sketch everything out, print it out in a thumbnail box. And my art director was pretty cool, because he was adamant that people actually physically draw, even though they were kind of like button pushers, button clickers in Photoshop, moving elements around. And the problem I had though with that sketching out on a piece of paper was that shirts could just be like a logo. Like the Batman logo is what? It's yellow with the bat symbol cut out of it on a black shirt. You know, like if I sketch the bat symbol out, that's not going to impress anybody when you look at a pencil thumbnail. You know, but if I blob a piece of yellow on black and then just sketch in the little bat symbol, now that says, and you zoom out, you can see, oh, that would be a solid, that catches my eye, as it would on an actual t-shirt. So this whole process of designing in color silhouettes, basic black silhouettes, and then throwing color on top is just really a way to ensure that the tone of the piece works before I ever commit to drawing anything. Because you'd never want to draw a bunch of stuff and then go, I hope I can figure out how to make this all work, you know, in color 15 hours later.
Oh, man.
So right there, I've added a glow to the back of your Megavisions logo so that it pops out.
And it looks like one of the cool things about the finish design, I know we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves, but I like it. It seems like there's you've factored in kind of the glow within the artwork. I don't know if that was intentional or if that was like it looked like in Earl's hands, like it's almost like reflecting, like the glow off the logo is reflecting off his hand. It was like
I go after the fact.
Yeah, that was super awesome. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But how did you end up getting involved in video game magazines? I'm interested to kind of hear about that and how you kind of got your start in the gaming industry.
Sure. So I grew up going to Comic-Con here in San Diego, which is about to start up. And they have these things called portfolio reviews, where you bring your artwork, put it in front of an editor, and they tell you whether you're worthy enough to get a job or not. And I knew when I was a kid, I'm not worthy enough to get a job. My art sucks. So rather than waste my time dragging my art to portfolio reviews, I'd stand up in the front and watch a bunch of other people get their reviews, and no one minded a kid sitting there. Matter of fact, most editors were like, yeah, kid, you watch. So I watched a lot of reviews. Cut to like 10 years later, around 2003, 2004, I decided I'm good enough to go to a con, so I'd buy an artist table. Rather than, again, pitch myself, I figure if I bought a table, people are probably walking the floor, they'll see my stuff, and if they like me, I'll get work. And that actually happened 2 or 3 years later, at Comic-Con in the Wizard World in LA, where one of the main office guys at Play Magazine, then one of the bigger video game magazines, saw my stuff and said, hey, you know, would you be willing to work with Play? And I'm like, yeah, of course I would. You know, I know Play was ran by a guy named Dave Halverson, who created Game Fan Magazine. He used to work at AGM before that. He did Gamers Republic, and then he went and did Play after the whole .com crash. And so they met me there, and then I met up with Dave, and then he wanted to do these series of graphic novels based on video games that then could possibly be turned into the next game in the series. So they were working on something with a property called Death Junior.
Right. Yeah, I remember that. It was a PSP game, I think, at first, right?
Yeah, it was a PSP platformer. Had kind of a little bit of Danny Elfman, Beetlejuicy kind of feel to it.
It was a good game.
Yeah, it was a fun game. I think Backbone put that out. So he had an agreement with them to create an original graphic novel with the new stories, some extra characters, and then they could use that as a basis for a game. And I was like, why me? Like, I didn't really color things at the time too, like digitally. I didn't draw. I did everything with pencil, and I knew he wanted fully inked stuff. So he gave me an advance. It was really cool. He gave me an advance of almost like 10 grand. And then I used it to buy a Cintiq. Cintiq is like a Wacom tablet that it's like a monitor you can draw on.
Right. Okay.
Because I knew I'd have to do my own inking, and I drink so much coffee, man. I can't. Like my inks, like, they're very gritty, you know. And I'm like, he's gonna want clean pencils and shit. So I bought a Cintiq and taught myself how to ink digitally. And started working on this book. Well, you know, like all things, Dave Halverson, he can take a little while and kind of drag. So it turns out he didn't actually have a lot of scripts written, and I was sitting there on my advance for months with nothing to do except work on like 2 pages. And I was like trying to work freelance. I'm like, I quit a day job for this. I'm like, so it was a good lesson in, you know, never take a job unless, you know, they're actually ready to hire you, like they have scripts. So I went and pitched myself to Dave. I said, hey, one of two things is going to happen. I'm going to go back to t-shirts, or you're going to put me on payroll, and I could be your artist at play. So when you need all that art in the magazine, you don't have to freelance it. I can do whatever. And he knew I could do a bunch of different styles. If you wanted Splatterhouse or, you know, Crash Bandicoot, I could do either or. So he thought that'd be a good plan. So they put me on payroll, and I was like the only artist on payroll, I think, on a magazine probably in the United States, really, when you think about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so that was a great 2-year run, man, until the recession and knocked out all the magazines.
I'll tell you what, man, Play Magazine was awesome. I mean, that was a magazine that really stood out on the newsstand when you're going and look at that. Say you go to Barnes and Noble and you see the rack of magazines, and a lot of them just kind of blend in together. They kind of look the same, but Play Magazine was different. There was just, it seemed like there was just always like really big art, and it really put like art first in images, like big images and everything else. And so flipping through it, the design was awesome, and that was one of the things that always drew me to Play, and that was one of the things I liked the most about it. And I think the design and art in Play Magazine was just like way above everything else anyone was doing at the time. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, they struck a really good balance between the minimalist look in print and it keeping an artistic feel. Like, it wasn't just white pages with a big screen like when you see Game Informer. You know, it sort of tried to emulate that Play thing without. They would use color. If there was a color from a screen, like say Fallout 3, you know, has that kind of greenish hue, they would pick a bit of that green or that olive and put that into the flat piece of color that would contrast against the white text background. And
which is something that you see a lot of more magazines doing these days, it seems like.
Yeah, they were really one of the first. I mean, Dave was really good. I mean, his magazines were always artistic. You go back to Game Fan, that pushed the envelope of how many screens can you put on a page when no one was doing. Just tons of screens. They'd use elements, pixels. And they had to physically cut them out, by the way. They didn't have Photoshop back in the day. He'd show me, hey, we'd print them out and we do paste up. And I was like looking at it like, oh, shit. So a lot of those old magazines, you think those screens have a weird texture to them. It's because they printed them out on a printer, pasted them, and then captured them back and photographed them back in. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. But he was always big on integrating artwork too in the magazine. You'd always see like a big piece of artwork by LaShawn or Danimation. There's Sanford Green, Jeff Matsuda. And so I felt like I had giant shoes to fill. The first issue of Play that went to the racks when I was officially lead art, staff artist, was the Joe Mad Darksiders cover. The amazing piece where, War is like leaping down into the fray with the giant sword. And I was like, I can't he's like, yeah, so you'll do a cover and Joe Matt will do a cover. I'm like, fuck, what? You know, like, I was like, am I going to get a colorist? He's like, no, we pay you, you know? And I was like, oh, you Scrooge McDuck, you know? Like, you know, and I'm a big DuckTales guy, so I'm like,
Right.
all right, you know, I got to somehow do the job of 8 people now, you know? So it was a real interesting challenge, but I enjoyed working with Dave, you know, despite, you know, you'll see a lot of rumors about him, but a lot of people never actually worked with him. It's just the internet talking shit. So creatively, he was a lot of fun. And he knew how to find talent. I mean, not to say, oh, he found me, so he found talent. Those designers on the books, that was like they knew how to blend. He let them do whatever they needed to do. Like if they were like, I saw this great thing in the UK or in Poland, and I want to mix this with something from Japan, and I got this idea, he just let them do it. He never micromanaged that, you know?
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I was always, you know, he'd micromanage like Sonic's face. If you drew him wrong, that doesn't look like Sonic. You're like, fuck. You know, I had to fix Ratchet's face like 8 times on this Critters piece we did.
Oh man,
which featured all these furries and stuff. You know, all the critters of games. Yeah, I don't want to say furry. That connotates something. But
especially with Sonic.
Yeah, and he'd be like, "The face is wrong," and I'm like, "Ah, oh, man, I got to actually figure out how to do this." So, but yeah, so I went from Play fell under because you know advertising and magazines, you know, took the brunt of that, and they all went to YouTube. Around 2009, 2011, 2010, 2011. And so Dave said, hey, I want to relaunch Game Fan magazine because Play went under overnight.
That's crazy.
None of us saw that coming, man. Matter of fact, the whole time they're like, yeah, we're recession proof because, you know, people play games and they're going to read magazines. And they just, Play did not have a YouTube component. You know, Dave didn't believe in it. He used to do like Access Hollywood back in the 90s, and he'd tell me, I was on Access Hollywood, man. YouTube's a joke. You know, it's not real TV. And I was like, Dave, perhaps you might be missing the point. Like, you know, and I felt bad because I was like, you know, I tried to get him on Kickstarter in 2010 when it first started. Mm-hmm. And they did a magazine Killscreen on there. I'm like, Killscreen's on there, dude. We could totally go there, do one issue of Pete. And he did. It was like, that's like charity. And I'm like, no, it's not. He didn't. It's hard 6 years ago to describe what Kickstarter was to people.
Right. Yeah.
So he wanted to do Game Fan. He asked if I would come over and help with that. I was like, as an artist, and he's like, well, you know, they're having trouble. The Play guys are having trouble creating Game Fan. Like the layouts were so detailed. They had so many screens and so many elements. They're used to one big screenshot and Play.
Yeah, GameFi. I mean, I've seen some of the artwork that you did, and I mean that it's crazy. It's so detailed and so many elements that go in it. I mean, the whole thing has to. I couldn't imagine how long it would take, but the whole thing it's not just one screenshot and you throw a bunch of text on it and you know a few other screens and a headline. Like the whole thing had to be created specifically just for those 2 pages or that single page or whatever. Like there was a lot of stuff going into all those pages, so I could imagine, especially if you're a designer used to doing it the way that Play did, and now you're having to come in and do this completely different style for Game Fan. I can imagine that they have a lot of trouble with that.
Yeah, so my solution was, well, why don't they do the basic layout, hand it over to me, and I can reskin it? Because I had done that in T-shirts many times. Someone hands you a layout, and you got to take that and flip it 8 different ways. You know, so I'm very familiar with doing that, and that seemed to be the plan until the designer quit because apparently Dave didn't have enough money. You know, and I didn't really realize that at the time. I mean, David always paid me, so I was like never really like, oh yeah, he'll pay me. You know, he gives advances, you know, checks always arrive. So I didn't really see I don't know, I hadn't had that experience people always talk about, the starving artist experience, you know?
Yeah.
I'd been pretty clever up until that point, but I allowed friendships to sort of get the better of me in this one. So he's like, well, why don't you be the art director and you could do all the layouts? I'm like, huh? He's like, yeah, laying out a magazine's really easy. So they had this thing called the bunker, which is where Game Fan was located at, this little hole, which I actually liked. Play had a big office, and I didn't really think that was the smart move given, you know, financial.
Yeah, I'm sure it wasn't cheap either.
No. He wasn't too happy about that either, but you know. And so they had this bunker, which I really liked. And he's like, come down to the bunker. And so I was down there for a few days. He's like, I'll show you how to do it. So he opens up InDesign and he starts dragging boxes, and he's like, yeah, you just make these boxes and you insert image and you're done. And I was like, oh, all right. Yeah, you just drag it, and and I was
Yeah, it's
like,
as simple as that.
yeah, and he just gave me a couple copies of Old School Game Fan, and Play, gave me some old files from Play. He's like, yeah, you can just figure it out. There's the fonts, and mind you, everything they did was made on a Mac. Mind you, everything they did not transfer over, and it was I mean, this is 2011. My career technically started in 2005. So 6 years later, I felt like I was getting my real trial by fire.
Yeah, for
You know,
sure.
because I was afraid of screwing up Game Fan, and the first two issues were difficult. Like they came up with this idea in the first issue of Game Fan to split it in half. And one half will be Game Fan, and the other half will be Movie Fan. So you'll flip the magazine, and they'll have all about movies on the other side because movies are big.
Okay,
And,
right, yeah.
yeah, and I was just like, I didn't even like, well, who's going to do that? I can't do the Movie Fan layout. He's like, no, we got another guy for that. The guy who did the Play thing will do that because it's really easy. I'm like, all right. Well, that guy didn't do that. And so the last 3 days, I'm stuck figuring out what to make with Movie Fan.
Oh
So
my
I just
god.
made giant 3D text, headers, and I don't know, man. I was like, I don't know what to do. And when the reviews came in, they were like, this guy looks like it was former employees were kind of shat on me too, because they were bitter about the
Oh
bankruptcy.
yeah, of course.
And they're like, yeah, this guy just sounds like he just found out what a 3D text program was. And I'm like, fucking damn, dude. Like, like I'd never been on this. Yeah, I'd never been on the shit end of the internet stick before. Like that was
Oh, it's not fun. Yeah.
And Dave used to tell me, I don't read any of that stuff. And I get why, given him,
Right, yeah, no kidding.
But I had a hard time at that. I'm like, I gotta look. I mean, I just wanted validation that I wasn't screwing up Game Fan. By the time I got to the third issue, we put Death Spank on the cover. You remember that game? Death Spank. So Ron Gilbert, creator of Maniac Mansion, went and did this game called Death Spank, which is a hilarious, pretty fun game. Not imperfect. It's one of those 7.0 games. Does a lot right. It's got some technical glitches and, you know what I mean? Some design, like not perfection issues.
The name sounds familiar, but I can't put a face to it.
Yeah, it was a PSN game, like Death Spank. And so we put that on the cover, and it was this E3 blowout. The magazine, Game Fan 2000, this is 2011, issue 3. If you can find one on eBay when they pop up, I've got to send you a copy because it's huge. It's like 150 pages. The magazine itself, I didn't even get this, was Rolling Stone size. It's like 12 by 12. I mean, it's giant. It was the IMAX print. Like, it's the best thing I could ever describe it. Like, this is like 1997 in HD in IMAX. Like the magazine is the biggest magazine you've seen ever, dude. And it was heavy, glossy stock, and it was
it's like those giant books you see in the library.
Yeah, so you bring this into like Dave was like, well, we bring this into a meeting, and the colors, I put a lot of color in it. So when you bring it into like a meeting for advertisement, people are like, oh my God, that's amazing. But we don't have any advertising money, and it's like if I had made the magazine, 4 years earlier, we probably have been really huge, but anyhow, so I did that for a couple years, figured out how to make Game Fan on my own. I had to get every screen, every asset. And then around issue 6, I really was like, all the cover art was really pissing me off. On issue 5, Donkey Kong Country Returns had come out on the Wii. And my first issue of Game Fan ever, old school Game Fan, was the Donkey Kong Country cover. And I really wanted to draw a Donkey Kong cover. I was like, let me do a Donkey Kong cover. I want to do a Donkey Kong Returns layout. I want to make a map. We can do the history, and I'll make it a treasure map as the history. And I had this whole layout for the Donkey Kong Returns. And the magazine took so long to come out because of funding and everything else that Dave was like, well, the cover art isn't going to be timely. So they put Little Big Planet 2 on there. And it's some of the most horrible assets I've ever received. There was these really bad CG assets. The characters are freaking horrible. It's not Sackboy. It's all these weird ones, And so I at least was able to take it and add like a crayon effect and paint over it and try to give some kind of feel to it. But I remember the reviews on that were like, the cover art's fucking horrible. I'm like, yeah, I know, man. Like, I tried to get hand-drawn covers. I was really big. Like, Game Fan used to have hand-drawn covers. PlayStation Magazine had hand-drawn covers. Play had them. But Game Informer, Next Generation, Edge, they just went with the CG assets. And to me, they all start to look the same.
Yeah, that's going back to kind of what I was saying earlier, is that those ones that just use either CG or it just looks like PR assets or something like that. It just looks boring to me.
Because that's exactly what they are.
Yeah, yeah. I've never liked that.
Well, guess what's in there,
Yeah, yeah. By the
Yeah,
way,
and
Greg Johnson just commented on the video. He's watching it right now, so it's kind of awesome. Hey, Greg, he's the creator of Toe Jam and Earl, so he's kind of watching this creation come to life. He said that Play Magazine actually featured Toe Jam and Earl 3 on the cover back in 2002.
I have no doubt. Dave used to have them all on the wall. And I got to be honest, when I got to the play offices, I even told, I mean, luckily Dave and I got along really well. He was a really nice guy. And I was like, I'm here. I am here. Like I was walking the hallways, seeing the covers, and I'm like, I have found, finally, after all this time, I have found my calling. Like, because I used to make my own game magazines and I would draw my own layouts and photo albums. Nintendo Power was a huge influence, Game Fan second. I didn't have comic book shops. I had Nintendo Power growing up. And so that's how I follow games and artwork. And I led into game. EGM always looked weird to me, but Game Fan looked very artistic. So when I got to play, I was like, this is what my future is. So I'm never leaving. He's like, well, really? I'm like, no. I'm going to be here like a long 10, 20 years, man. And little did I know it would all, be taken away. I was like, no,
Oh,
But yeah, they had them all on the wall. That's awesome. Yeah, Dave was a big fan of keeping the critters alive, even as the industry sort of went toward, Grand Theft Auto and Call of Duty and Gears of War. He'd always make, if there was a Blinks of Time Cat to be done, if there was anything remotely. I mean, case in point, the first cover of Game Fan 2010, he put Blade Kitten on the cover,
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I know, right? And I'm like, what? I actually had a No More Heroes too, but he was like, it's timely and it'll be a PSN. No one's put a PSN game on a cover before. And I'm like, but Blade, I mean, I could draw this, but it's a cool character, but I know I could. So
that's cool though, man. I respect that kind of stuff. It's kind of refreshing to see stuff, people that are willing to step out and do something different like that and take chances on something that may not be the most popular thing or may not, be the most popular game to sell a cover issue, for that particular month or whatever, but that they're still willing to go out there and do that kind of stuff. That's awesome.
And, you come to find that a lot of the things that you see on gaming sites, I'm not going to name them, but when you see them on gaming sites or you see them on YouTube channels, they're being done because people like to, what I call trend boarding. They go, well, this is popular, or they have ties to PR. And so you just see the same 5 games now. And how are you supposed to discover games unless, you have someone out there who, who isn't saying, okay, look, I get it, when there's something big coming around, here you go. But we don't need to promote Mario on the cover unless we're going to do a big Mario retrospective or something for the fans. Let's take that Mario, that generic Mario asset cover, because they would never let you draw something. Nintendo wouldn't. They'd make you put the CG Mario. So take that, and what else is coming out in the indie scene, Let's put Grand Theft Auto, or I'm sorry, Retro City Rampage, or, Death Spank, or, Psychonauts, or even these days, Broken Age or something like that, or any one of these Kickstarter games like Wonder Boy. Dave would put that new Wonder Boy came out. Dave would have put that on play. Like, it'd be on the cover now. It would be on the cover now. I had Nino Cooney in that magazine the second it was announced at E3 in 2011.
Wow.
And so yeah, he was always about that what I call a 7.0 game. Like I would tell him all the time, like, these games that get 7.0s at the time, but 10 years later you could still play them because they do 1 or 2 things really well. And they aren't really generic. Or like that game, no one did like Toe Jam and Earl was one of those games that confused people when it came out. I remember my friends like, "What's it about?" I'm like, "Well, you can play it with a friend, or
it's hard to explain, around. Really,
yeah. Which nowadays is like, well, yeah, I can play everything online. I mean, what's the big deal there, But co-op multiplayer games that are free roaming didn't exist in 1992 or 1 or like
right. And that was one of the coolest things for me and my cousins, man, growing up is we would play this game all the time because, like you said, it's kind of a 2-player co-op game that was a lot different than anything else that that was on the Genesis or the NES at the time. It wasn't like any sort of combat style game where you're trying to fight each other or do anything like that. I mean, you're just literally trying to, for the most part, and a lot of times you're trying to stay away from any sort of combat or anything like that. And so it was a lot different. And it was a lot of fun. And I just remember, just playing that game together for hours, you know what I mean? And it was one of those just really different games that just came out of nowhere. But like you said, it's really hard to kind of explain what it was, especially back then. You know.
Yeah, well, at the time, the only co-op games you had on console were beat 'em ups. Double
Right. Yeah.
Dragon, Mighty Final Fight, or Final Fight on the Genesis. You know, these kind of games where you just plug in quarters, punch the shit out of stuff, step and repeat. And so a game that was more exploratory and co-op, I mean, there was probably something somewhere I'm not, remembering at the top of my head, but it was one of those ones that clearly stood out, on top of having characters that were hip hop, which at the time, man, like, I mean, there was no Fresh Prince of Bel-Air on TV, folks. Like,
Right.
I mean, I had the Fat Boys movie. I think my friends thought I was crazy because I was like, oh, "This is hilarious! You guys are awesome!" They make all their noise. They make their music. And I grew up with Prince and George Clinton. My mom was really into funk. And
Oh, that's cool.
and so yeah, so I mean, 94 East. Peaches and Herb. I mean, for everything. From 70s soul through 80s. Early funk was in my repertoire. And so when this shit came out, I was like, this is my stuff. Look at these guys, hats backwards, like. But it also felt a lot of fun.
Yeah, it also kind of fell right in with the kind of the reputation Sega was trying to push at that time frame as well, like trying to be this edgy kind of cool company. And you have something like Toe Jam and Earl come out, which is exactly that. You know what I mean? It was something that no one's really doing from a visual standpoint and from a music standpoint too. Just with all the kind of the funky style music was awesome. And so I think it really meshed really well with Sega's strategy with what they were trying to do at the time. And it was just kind of
I was bought hook, line, and sinker. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was like, Nintendo's old. I mean, like, okay,
yeah.
I only had one Nintendo system, mind you, but it felt like it'd been out forever. We had it since 85. So come 1991, kid year, that's like 20 years, not just 6. So I'm like, Nintendo's dead. They're old. Mario sucks. I'm like, bring in the new, and they had Toe Jam and Earl, and then, Altered Beast and Shinobi and Sonic the Hedgehog blew my mind, and I was like, it felt like everything was fast and really, kind of like the Attitude Era of the WWF,
right?
Like, yep. Come later. So, and then, eventually you get the games like Earthworm Jim come from this. I mean, really, when you think about it, those characters, it's almost like the Deadpool thing that's going on now in comic book movies, where you're getting, mm-hmm. You're getting these characters that are like the things we got before, these mascots, but now they got some attitude, mm-hmm. and the first one's up got a better chance. And I shudder to think what that will reap, 5 years from now. What crazy attitude combo characters will we get that we never wanted?
Everything's like self-deprecating and poking fun,
No one knows why they're doing it. They're just doing it because it all becomes scary movie, Yeah. So, but Toe Jam and Earl was fun. I mean, that Battletoads stuff that kind of came to. I mean, yeah, that's all from Ninja Turtles, but there was these more like attitude geared. Sonic was the attitude version of Mario at the time.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that was really what Sega's stance was. It's like, let's see what Nintendo's doing. We're going to do the opposite of that. And that's what it was. It's like, okay, we're going to push everything with attitude. It's going to be an alternative to what Nintendo's doing. And we're really going to target not just little kids, but we're targeting
little kids. That never sounds good.
Right.
In the meeting, right?
Yeah, you don't want to say
slide,
that.
You put the slide on the overhead, if you remember what those were, and it's like, we're targeting little kids. And you're like, says Michael Scott, right?
But it was more of like they were going to college campuses and things like that. They were like, look, Nintendo's got these young kids, basically hooked to the NES. We're going to, take our console and we're gonna get it in dorm rooms and and things like that. And so you get these older kids who are into the kind of music that you talked about before. Now they see games like this and more characters with attitude, and they're more relevant to their interests. And I think that was just an insanely smart strategy. But I mean, also you gotta, in addition to having characters that are relevant and cool to people, you gotta have gameplay that's gonna kind of match up to that. And this was just so different than what everything was out there at the time. And
I'll say too, the Master System was a fun system.
Oh, I love
my neighbors had it. I didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
My neighbors had it, but it had no message. When I'd ask my friends, "What's on it?" Well, I mean, like, where's the Mario game? And they're like, Alex Kidd, not really. Like that was kind of the talk. My friend had Zaxxon 3D. And he's like, you got to try this. And it was polarized lenses that actually, it worked, like versus my Rad Racer 3D, which was just that red and blue effect. And
Yeah, that sucked.
And Nick was like, I don't get the 3D. It just ruins the screen. But the Zaxxon 3D really worked. And the Master System had like, Phantasy Star, a bunch of different games, but there was no message. The Master System was weird. You go into a Toys R Us, it was just this. You have all the Nintendo games, which were filled with color. And you get to the Master System section, it was just white. Just white with grids. And that looks cool now. Like when you take the photos of all the stuff together, like, man, that looks so awesome. But in the 80s toy store, it was like, as a kid, you're like, I don't know what I just walked into. I don't want to be in here. Like, it looks weird. I don't even know what these games are about.
Especially from back then, a lot of the times that's what you base the game on, is the box art. If the box art looks awesome. And yeah, I mean, that dates back all the way to the times of the Atari, when they couldn't put just a stick figure on the cover and be like, oh, this is Indiana Jones. Like, they had to come up with this just elaborate artistic cover that looked amazing. It was great art. And it wasn't at all representative of the gameplay, but that was kind of the way the game industry was back then. Is the art style on the cover is what a lot of times sold the magazine. Well, but you have the Master System with just clip art on its cover.
Yeah, case in point, you put the Mario Brothers 3 box art next to any Sega Master System case. Which one are you looking at?
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like,
yeah.
It's just design. It's just clever to. So whatever they managed to do with the Sega of America, like they did really well on the Genesis, and then anything after that, it's it all went to it all went to hell, afterward. But that was the right time, and Game Fan built right off that. Old school Game Fan.
Mm-hmm.
They had Sega sector in the magazine. He was all about. I mean, he sold Saturns. He sold Sega CDs. And people were like, "I bought one because of you." And then later it was like, "I bought one because of you." But but yeah, in hindsight,
you're pissed at the time.
Well, yeah, because you bought one and moves out. It would be great, but you'd be you'd only play 3 games, and there'd be all these great games in Japan. Sega was just it was just a strange time. It was wonderful games. You just never knew if you were going to get them.
Right. Yeah.
Or when you would, So,
and that's what was so much fun about looking at these, the magazines back then, is because you'd see all these awesome games coming from Sega, and that's what was one of my most, fun aspects about looking at in reading magazines back then, is just looking at the upcoming games, that were going to be coming out at some point. And a lot of times, like you said, we would never get them, but it was always just cool to be able to, look at some new game that's coming out, then go into school the next day and telling your friends about it, and kind of being the kid in the know about the next, hotness that's coming out.
Yeah. So let me just talk a little bit about the cover, because we've kind of, quite a bit has happened here. So all I've done here is I've blocked in each character as a basic silhouette, and then I lock something called the transparency. What that means is, in Photoshop, everything you draw on, they have these things called layers, right? Everything in Photoshop has layers. And you can set it up so anything you draw on the image is drawn with the transparent background. So if I draw this, Earl here, or which one is this? I can never remember.
It's Toe Jam.
Toe Jam, sorry. And so it has been 22 years since I've played.
Yeah.
So bear with me, probably more. I'm getting that old. But so if you draw him as a black silhouette, you can click this little button here in Photoshop. That's called lock transparency. That means it will only let you draw on things that have already been drawn on that layer. So I can't draw outside him. So that means I can lock the transparency and then fill him in, or Earl back here. I can fill that silhouette in with just the base color that I want to use for his body, his shorts, and start to block in details in color. Versus manually trying to draw a bunch of shoelaces. Imagine all the lines you'd have to work out before you even know if you want that.
Mm-hmm.
So before I know I even want that, I'm just blocking this in basic little blobs of color, locking the transparency, and then filling in the details. And here I'm trying to figure out, you see his leg? He has 3 legs. Here's the problem I came to find out. If you put one coming right at you here, it looks like he's got a big, big...
Which is always kind of the insinuation with Toe Jam anyway, right?
Yeah, but you want to move it right to the side. When it's coming at you, it's like a John Oliver, like it's like, hey there, how you doing? So plus I don't want his feet stomping the Genesis, which I really try to make a habit of incorporating the consoles and some of the more collector's items, materials in the layouts. You know, like it's important to me. Like when I was at Play, that's one of the first thing I did when we did this critters piece. I worked in the consoles, into the art. There was this big jam piece with all these critters, and Toe Jam and Earl were on there. Initially, it had 75 characters. Dave gave me a list of 75 characters.
Holy crap!
The magazine's 8.5 by 11, so you figure that one out. And so I was like, well, I might have to go 2 pages, Dave. And because I was working digitally and I was doing the silhouette process, I could figure that out. That being said, to draw 75 characters and do flats and colors, I ran out of time.
That's nuts.
I ran out of time, so I had to cut it in half. And so Toe Jam and Earl got the axe. But to make up for it, I decided, what if I add in the consoles and in little games, so that way you can. It's more like a legacy piece.
Oh right, yeah.
And that threw Dave off. He was like, "Why are you doing the console? You could have drawn more characters." I'm like, "There's enough characters. Maybe the consoles." Because when I was a kid and we had these art classes, the first thing you do in an art class is you draw still life. That's where they put a bowl of fruit. You ever have that? Someone puts a bowl of fruit in front of you, and you got some pencils. You start shading the shit out of this bowl of fruit. It's horrible. It's a horrible way to teach people to draw. And I hated drawing fruit because it would just make me hungry. I was kind of a fat kid. I was like, I want food, you know. So I would draw game controllers, you know, and video game box, things that interest me. I would just, if I had to draw something, I'd rather draw this. And I remember my teacher was like, "Where are you going to go with that? No one draws that." And I'm like, "I'm doing it now. Look at me." You know. But the controllers and the game systems were as much to me, and the boxes and the box art. And I was thinking about maybe putting Sega on his cap right there. But then I remembered, you know, there was this whole conversation of Sega maybe having an issue.
Yeah, they don't like when you use the name.
It's a shame because they don't know how to use it properly sometimes, you know, like when they make cartoons. So I was thinking about Yo Sega Raps would be funny, like a play on MTV. But now I got Toe Jam doing the Vanilla Ice pose here.
I like
Shocker.
That's awesome. What's funny is it's with Sega, sometimes you'll see them use the name in all caps, and sometimes it'll be uppercase S and the EGA is lowercase. So it's always funny to see how that is, because I mean it's supposed to be an acronym for Service Games, which was kind of the original name of Sega when they were first founded, and they've since just shortened it to Sega, and don't really talk about the whole Service Games aspect anymore. But it's just funny to see how they internally will use it every once in a while too. You'll see it lowercase sometimes.
It's funny, when I was a kid, I knew there was a thing called the Mega Drive because I saw it, you know, in a Game Fan issue, and I was wondering, did they just name Sega like instead of Mega? They just, since it's in the States, you know, like I didn't. Yeah. I was a kid. I guess, I mean, that makes sense, and you could tell people that, and they believe it. You know, like in the schoolyard.
You could lie about anything back then. Pre-internet, you could get away with so much.
Yeah. I remember calling the Nintendo game counselors and lying that I drew the Zelda manga and the Nintendo Power. You know, yeah, I'm an artist. I draw the deck. I thought that was drawn in Japan. I'm like, oh no, we lay it out here and then we outsource. I mean, as a kid, I would like just make stuff up.
That's hilarious, man. Yeah. What was the purpose? Like, what were you?
I don't know. Well, I was calling for help on Link's Awakening, which it turns out I just sucked. I just needed to time the jump properly. So I was oriented for $2.99 a minute. You know, so while I was there, he's like, "So what do you do?" I was like, "Well, I draw." You know, that's technically true. I'm drawing, but then I was already in the lie. You know, so I just
you just keep going.
And then I'm looking around my desk, and I got pictures of I'm like, "Yeah, I drew the Zelda manga. It's like Takahiro Koshu." I mean, it's like it's so. Like, you hear the guy going, "Really?" Like, I thought that, and then you know. People would lie. Like, I guess the idea that someone might lie on the phone, you know, like why would they pay $3.99 and then lie? Like, I don't know, man.
Or then why is the guy that drew this Zelda cover calling us asking for help for Link's Awakening?
I know, right? Me and that guy had that experience, and
that's hilarious. You two will always have that.
Yeah. So, anyways, to go back to the career thing. So, I left Game Fan in November of 2011. I gave up. There was no money. I love Dave. I love everything, but I literally couldn't buy oranges one day. And I'm like, now I'm that guy, you know? So it was with issue 6. I said, I'm going to be done with issue 6 and I expect to be paid and I need to be out. And I didn't get paid. You
Damn.
know, so I couldn't do issue 7. I was like, I can't do it. You know, they'd always paid me, but they just could they could, or they were unwilling. I got an apology, you know, a really nice one from him and his wife, but they never sent me the money, so whatever that means, you know. Like,
Yeah.
I love Dave, but
Yeah.
it's just this industry, you know, is changing, as you guys have found out. You know, what you're
Mhm.
doing now isn't, you know, like I don't consider Megavisions or any of these, you know, like Nintendo Force, you know, like consolation prizes. I think it's the evolution of the medium. You know, like something new is happening, you know, where things are, you don't have to have an office. You can group things together. You can get
Yep.
different voices. You know, is the money, you know, enough what it used to be? Probably not. I don't think it can. You know, like, I mean, I don't know how Nintendo Force could operate an office in Thousand Oaks, California. You know,
There's no way, right? Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like there's just I was talking to Kevin Convertito, who is the one of the original designers of ODCM back in the day, and he was telling me the budget that they had for just each issue, and it was just insane the amount of money they were spending into that magazine, just from production standpoint, the paper quality, the covers, and everything else. I just can't imagine putting that much money and then hoping that you're actually going to make that a return investment on that. It's insane.
well, it worked really simply. They would take subscriptions and give them out basically for free. So like, I had $17, got me a year. I'm like, that just, all that did was buy them a number, and that number was how many subscribers we have. And so it was the push to get all these subscribers, and then they would go to advertisers and say, we have a reach of 100 million people. It's no different than what YouTube does now. I got subscribers, I got 100,000, I got 2 million subscribers, I got views. That same model has just moved to YouTube, you know. And so in magazines, what it is allowing though is when you do something like a magazine or print or what you guys are doing, it's actually coming from a place of the content will be has the opportunity, let's put that, has the opportunity to come from a place of actual enthusiasm and love versus what do we got to cover this month because this game is coming out. And I got to tell you, man, in t-shirts, I did, you know, like I said, licensed apparel off and on. I went back to licensed apparel after Game Fan. And all that is sales reps coming over telling you what's going to be the next big thing, and they're all wrong. You know, and you know, you don't buy a lot of t-shirts from Target these days that are fan related. You buy a lot of them come online, you know, weird quirky shirts, because they all think they're going to tell you what's going to be the next. And so you're doing things because that's what's going to be big. And I would sit there and go, how do you know, like Super Patriot, Iron Man 3 is going to be the big character because what? It's a new armor. I'm like, this audiences are not that. It's not 1984, man. Like,
yeah,
that was a villain in the comic, and chances are no one's going to like him. So why would they? And I don't mean like a Joker type villain. Probably just a guy they don't like. You know, like, so I don't know. Maybe I even made a joke once. Maybe he'll kidnap the president. Turns out in the movie, he ended up kidnapping the president. I was just in the theater laughing. Ha! All that merchandise is going nowhere. Chargeback, and you get chargebacks when they don't buy this stuff, by the way. So these magazines, you know, you would see things covered because, I mean, why would they put Call of Duty on a cover? I mean, really, you know, is that cover material? Like, is that going to like? I mean, if it covers Call of Duty, great. If you're going to do a legacy piece, maybe a cool piece of, but there's no like characters or anything to latch onto. Like for me, like covers should be something that I mean, it not just stands out. It should say something about the feeling of the issue, the feeling of the world. Like each little magazine, each little book is a universe to itself. I consider Game Fan a universe. You know, Megavisions. You know, Sega Nerds, your guys' site. It's your own little like portal. Exactly. You know, and everything should reflect the tonality of that. And when you shove an image and a crap load of text all over that image just to tell everyone what's inside of you, that's a swap meet. You know what I mean? Like, that to me is not artistic. You know, and I don't care what metric proves a short-term game. Like, well, this will go and sell a lot now. In 5 years, it's gone. It's playing the short game for no long-term survival. And they don't care about long-term survival. You know, the bean counters.
Yep.
You know,
that's
they
like
just
that, the Batman, is it the Arkham City collection cover art? Have you seen that, where it's just like loads and loads of text all over the place, and it just became this big meme that everyone just makes fun of now? But just go back to that. I mean, it had an awesome cover. The art on it looked really badass. It was just kind of this zoomed in, like a close up of Batman's face, and he's just having this
It's Batman. Like
Yeah.
I mean, I'm old enough to remember when they came out a movie called Batman, and the poster was just the logo, cropped,
Yeah,
like just the
right.
center of it, not even the whole logo, you know. And that
Yeah.
sold. Yeah, and T-shirts I'd always come back, guys. The most successful shirt of all time, I think, is the Batman logo shirt. It's one
Mhm.
color on black, the cheapest shirt we can find next to white, you know.
Right.
And by the way, it's one color. Works in neon, works in orange, works in red, works in anything. Like, and so I always bring it back to like that mentality that, you know, iconic trumps, in my opinion. You know, I hate Trump, you know, iconic imagery will
Right.
always defeat trendy topics.
Hmm.
And I mean, when I go to artist alleys at cons, I was just this one. This guy's telling me, well, these characters are going to be big around November because this game's coming out. I'm telling him, like, are you a sales department? Like, just do what you're passionate about, and you will find people, you know, who are also equally passionate, and then they will want to buy it. That's my Battletoads. I was pulling out some. I have some filters that I preset up for lighting and shading.
Oh,
So
cool.
I don't actually put them in a, because they're ever evolving. I kind of grab from 3 or 4 different files I have already set up. So I'll drag in my basic shade. Now I'll tell you what I'm doing here. So I had the basic colors worked in on them, and then what I do is this is a shade layer that it's already set up to how I like it, and then I drop it in, fill it up with shade, and then I mask out the areas of light.
Okay.
Here in a second. So they kind of go dark. I'm not going to keep the background dark, but and then now in a mask, this mask means that you can you paint in black and white in the
Right.
mask. So anything that you mask out with black, you can't see. So it looks like I'm erasing, but I'm not. I'm just painting. If on the left-hand side, there's this little tool, you can see I'm flipping between black and white, which in
Okay.
Photoshop
Yes.
is one button. You hit the X button. It's a very efficient way. So I can just underlight the characters or work on the lighting.
Interesting.
And that versus adding tons of shadows. Adding tons of shadows takes twice as long. So it's like the minimalist amount of effort to get to. Plus, you get to work on, again, dramatic lighting. Now, if it was a daytime shot where they're going to have zero, you know, like shadows, then I would
Hmm.
invert it with white and just paint in a little bit of shadow. So here I'm using the airbrush to erase that shade back there and then add shadow light on the balloons. So that's basically what I'm doing there. This has just come, man, from doing 100 of these, probably, I don't know, 300 roughies now at this point. You
Jeez.
know,
You put
everything
out a ridiculous amount of content like all the time. I follow you on Twitter, and the amount of art that you're putting out all the time is just insane. But it's all top notch stuff, man. It's really really good stuff. I'm
I'm
a big fan
trying
of
to
your
get
work.
noticed.
Right.
Notice me, you know, I have
Yeah.
nothing. That's my only goal now. If I could just get a little bit noticed. But what I'm trying to say too is fans, when you do things that are just trendy, people will come and look at it, but they don't spend money.
Right.
They don't spend, people who spend money spend things because they care. Why would you spend money on something unless you really want it, right?
Hmm.
So if you want to, I managed to do well with very few. I have very few followers when you think about the totality of my audience, you know. But I've managed to attract the kinds of people that actually give a shit about the things that I'm doing because I care. Like I'm going to work on Battletoads. You know why? Because I fucking love Battletoads. Not because
That's
I hear
awesome.
there's a rumor Battletoads is coming out and that'll be
Right.
really popular. Like, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. If I want that life, I'll go back to working in the art department. Or, you know what
Oh,
I mean? Like, I mean
yeah.
that. I don't need that. You know?
But that's the thing, though, is that you if you continue to work on the stuff you're passionate about, and you don't think about, oh, this is going to sell, and the sales is not what's at the forefront of your mind, and really what the inspiration and reason why you're doing all this stuff. You're gonna get a following that's going to be kind of faithful and want to support the kind of stuff you're doing because even though it might be smaller than some of the other channels, artists, or magazines, whatever it might be, that's kind of targeting the mass audience out there or whatever. But you're going to find those people that continue to support your work because it's the stuff that they enjoy and that they're passionate about, and they share that same passion as you. And so that's why, you know, when you have a new Kickstarter project for a new piece of art or something like that, that it always does super well on there and always goes above your your goal and everything like that. So I love seeing that stuff, and your current project is really cool. I don't know if you want to talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. So I've been working on this passion project for the last 3 years, off and on. I'm almost at the point where it can be full time. Uh, I've done about several Kickstarters. I fulfilled them all except this one. This one called Game Cave. And what happened was at the time I was doing some prints and art-driven Kickstarters. And I thought, well, I want to do something about games. And, you know, I got a few notices from some game companies who didn't want me putting up game art on Kickstarter. I said, well, if it was in a game magazine, I know they can't do anything or complain about that because I'm promoting their game. I know because I worked at a game magazine. Like, I'm one of the few people who can say I've worked at a game magazine.
Did you guys ever get any issues with companies, like
Yes.
with trademark and copyright
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah. It works really simple like this, right? And I'm sure some lawyer would come over and whatever. I'll tell you the real world experience, right? The Rodney Dangerfield back to school experience is really simply this. You can't use a character to sell a book like Nintendo. You can't put Mario on the cover unless they approve of it to sell your magazine that's going to be in hundreds, unless it's with other characters. So like Toe Jam and Earl, this is fine because this is, you know what I mean? Like they chilled out on this, but at the time, if you put Mario on a cover, PR wanted to approve it. That was basically the standpoint. You could technically do it, but what you would be doing is you wouldn't get any review copies of the game.
Ah, I see.
They couldn't do anything about it because you're selling a product, but you're not going to get comped any free shit. And you know, they could revoke your demo kits and stuff like that, right?
Right. You can't. I mean, because they don't owe that to you. They don't have to give that to you. It's part of.
Yeah, that's all. That's part of the. You know, you promote us, we promote. You know, we give you access. So yeah, it's editorial. They can't do anything about it. But if you just put Batman on a cover and you don't even have any other text on it, then you could be construing that this is a. One second, let me. It could be construed that you're using Batman to sell your magazine versus actually covering Batman. That's why they would still put text on the cover. And when they would ship a subscription issue, they could do it without any text because we're not using it. Couldn't be since it's subscribers, they already bought it, so that argument could be used. But on the shelf, you have to put here's what else is in the issue. That's basically what you had to do, or you had to get it approved. Now, in the case where I did this EA cover for Mass Effect 2. It turned out to be the last issue of Play magazine. And I made the mistake of saying, hey, you know what? I hate that realistic Mass Effect art. I'm going to do something like in a gritty, I don't know why I decided to do this. I'm going to do something like in a gritty Stephen Platt kind of image style, which is not the tone of Mass Effect. You know, even if I came up with something, it could have been I don't know, man. So
I would have to look that up right now. I want to see it. See what it is.
Yeah, if you type in Mass Effect Play magazine, you'll dig it up. But it just wasn't quite right. And EA hated it, you know? They were like, why can't you just do something like your Bayonetta cover, which was literally just a CG asset from Bayonetta on a red background? And Dave was like, that wasn't a cover. That was like a contingency plan because some shit fell through. And they're like, we just want the CG characters. And so they at least fought for me on that one. But I made the promise to Dave, from now on, when I draw something for a game, I'll make sure it reflects the tone of the game. You know what I mean? Like, I appreciate that he went to bat for me on, but I got some. I mean, it's like some.
Was this Mass Effect 1 or 2?
2.
Okay, yeah, I see it right here.
Yeah. It doesn't look like Mass Effect. I had to do a lot of. I had a colorist Diego who did work, and then I had to go on top and add a ton more work to try and make it, you know.
But you know what though? It looks like if Mass Effect was ever turned into a comic book, this is what it would probably look like.
It didn't look any better or worse than the comics that were being produced. And my friend was actually drawing. I have an internet friend, Omar Francia, who was drawing the Mass Effect comic at the time at Dark Horse, and he was like, "Hey man, this would be a great variant cover." And I'm like, "Yeah, but art departments at EA don't understand that. Dark Horse gets it." You know, like the Mirror's Edge comic book that DC put out doesn't look a fucking thing like the game in terms of its tone and atmosphere, right? But if that ran as a cover on a game magazine back in the day, they would have never flown. So there's just, you know, when you're working with art departments and PR departments, which I'm sure you have a familiarity with, they have a very different agenda than comic book companies. So that was just a lesson that I learned. And the very next thing I did was this No More Heroes 2, which is going to be the cover for Play issue 100. And I was like, I didn't want to redraw things. I don't like that. You know, the mistake people I think make when they want to hit a tone for something, they just redraw things that have already been done.
Right.
You know, like I'll just take that CG asset and I'll draw it, you know, and that I didn't want to do. So figuring out the characters, the style of No More Heroes. If you want to draw in a different style, the trick is to work with the basic shapes. That's why I designed a silhouette, because the silhouette of Earl, the big dude, you could draw him in a realistic style or whatever. The silhouette, this understructure doesn't change that much. You know what I mean?
Right.
As long as you have the understructure, you can put any style on top you want. So with No More Heroes, it's a matter of figuring out the structure and then the ink brush style on top of that drawing. And ever since then, I've tried to make a real concerted effort to make sure that the tone, fits it, but while simultaneously not being like, I just redrew Battletoads, like there's the Battletoads, I redrew, Toe Jam, and that, like, you can't put this version of them on some piece that already came out. You know what I mean? And like be like, he just traced over it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Huh. So is there? It looks like there's a UK bag now called Play.
Yeah, he sold that off in the bankruptcy. The name.
Oh, okay.
So in the bankruptcy, you have to sell everything off to pay back your debtors. So Play got sold off. He with his savings bought Girls of Gaming, and I think he bought Girls of Gaming. Like that was it. Like so, he kept that one and then sold that off.
What's he doing now? Is he still doing the magazines now?
Well, he did this thing with Destructoid that lasted one issue, and I kind of felt bad because that was my plan, just to hook up with Destructoid back in.
So that was the Game Fan / Destructoid magazine.
Yeah, that was inadvertently my fault. Like back in 2011, I was like, "Hey, Dave, the complaint we were getting from advertisers was we don't have any online presence. That's why we can't help you." So I was like, "Why don't we just team up with someone who already has an online presence?" Because we went through this process of making a website that was a nightmare. I said, and of all the people that seem to fit the tone of Game Fan, I think Destructoid gets it. Them, Giant Bomb, and I think One Up at the time. One Up went out of business. So I was like, what about Destructoid? And we had a couple people on staff that had freelanced at Destructoid. And so those conversations started, and that seemed like a thing to do. But it didn't quite happen. And then after I left, there was a couple issues that came out, and it kind of went away. Dave went back and built that relationship, and I guess they agreed to do it. And for whatever reason, man, I've heard conflicting opinions this way and that. It just didn't work. My guess is it just didn't have the finances. You know what I mean? It's like the same problem. It just didn't work out.
Because I think they were doing it was like a free magazine for a while.
Yeah, the idea is that if you were part of the Destructoid Club, I think you could get it, like for free, and then it would also go on the shelves. And I'm sure they had a pretty sound model, but what they kind of, and I can't speak for Dave Halverson, but the feeling I get is that Dave sold Game Fan to Metropolis in the 90s, for a lot of money. And because that's what you did at the time. In the 90s, you built a business and then you sell it and you make a lot of money, right? And that happened to every game developer in the late 90s too, right? Bullfrog, Psygnosis, they all sold to, Sony, EA, Activision, made a lot of money, gone out of business since then, right? So Game Fan went out of business with the .com crash. Dave went and made Gamers Republic, and that fell under with the .com crash because he brought in venture capital. So when you have venture capital, you don't actually own it. They own it, and then you get to be creative director. And every creative type wants that job. I just want to worry about so I don't want to worry about business. And so with Play, he owned it. He financed it with his own money, kickstarted himself basically, and it worked. Like it paid off. It was that right time of, like you still had, this is pre-Xbox 360, PS2, Grand Theft Auto 3 just took off, 2001, 2002. PS2 just came out, and it was like the right era to do it. And by the time the recession fell out, I think he was just so afraid of taking on any kind of venture capital that he would just not own it, or he wouldn't be able to. Even if he made some, he'd be an employee, and I don't think he was interested in being an employee for a game magazine. I don't know. I could never get a solid answer on that. I just know that at the end of the day, the only thing that disheartened me or saddened me was that the idea of making it so that we could all get, pay our rent. Let's just all pay our rent every month and then worry about everything else. Should have been the major focus. Everyone got something, and Rob's rent is paid and his student loans paid, and that's all I care about. I don't care about profit. And then we'll figure out how to profitize. Let's just build that. Exactly. And I just think it was trying to do too much. Trying to fix the Titanic, when all they kind of probably
when all
they
the
had
water's
to do
clear.
The best argument for fixing the Titanic I ever heard, by the way, was Jim Cameron said they could have just drove the boat to the iceberg, and got everyone off on the iceberg. It was right over there. Like they actually, with the way it was sinking, they would have made it. And yeah, people would be cold, but they wouldn't be dying of hypothermia.
And
like
they would
you
just been
actually
hanging out on the iceberg.
I saw him pitch that to a group of experts, and they all looked, and no one had ever thought that, you know, like, yeah, they all could have just, yeah, you just get on the iceberg and wait. They would have found them, you know. So, because they had the sightings of the iceberg in the morning. So
I wish that would have been an alternate ending in the Titanic movie.
Like the Clue movie. Here's how it could have ended, yeah. Right? Like there could be multiple Titanic endings. This is veering off into Neverland. So anyway, I love Game Fan, and then a few years later, I get a hit up from Brandon Justice. Brandon Justice kind of helped come on Game Fan to help with their online presence.
Mm-hmm.
He used to write a play. I think he worked on Game Fan back in the day. I can't remember. And he was teamed up with Mike Kennedy and Mark. I want to say Kaczynski. That's not it. It's Kraz something. Mark. Mark and Mike were making a magazine called Retro Magazine.
Right.
On Kickstarter, and Brandon was brought on to help with their social media stuff and managing editing. And he had just come from EGM, and so he said, "Hey, we need a cover artist. I know Rob, because he actually worked with me, you know." And I got a lot of respect. I mean, anytime someone's willing to put your name out there and say that guy is someone we should work with, I never forget. You know what I mean? Like the North remembers. You know? This is Stark land here in SketchCraft. All right, like
that's awesome.
Yeah. So I was really
appreciative. I have my winter's coming mug right here too. My coffee mug. So
yeah. So Brandon pitched me as a guy who could do that, and they said, "Hey, how much? You know, what would you do?" And then I showed Mark, you know, Game Fan, and then you get the whole, holy shit, you did everything. And I'm like, yeah, I drew covers and I did layouts and I got my assets and I did the production, and it was a nightmare. But I said, I just want to draw covers. And they're like, yeah, we could do the first cover. And so of all things, the first cover for Retro ended up being Mighty Number 9. Now, at the time, people loved Mighty Number 9.
It was the internet darling back then. Everyone was so happy.
I can never sell that print ever again. Like, you know, like I mean, like it's just a shame because I was really happy with the way it came out.
It was a great cover. I remember that. Yeah, I was a subscriber to Retro, but I also was working as their copy editor for a long time, and I was doing some writing for news and stuff in the magazine. So that's actually how I first found your name, and you know, I didn't realize that at the time, but that's when I first saw your work, knowing that it was you who did it. Looking back now, I remember your covers and some of your other work you did, but I never was able to kind of put a name to it, you know, until then. Yeah, so that was, you know, all the while I'm working on Game Cave, which is what I was initially talking about. Mm-hmm. Like, so I pitched this Kickstarter Game Cave, and like I just got a message now. Is it 3 years? Is it ever coming out? I'm like, wonderful. Yes, it's coming out. I basically had this idea of mixing a novel with the game magazine. Like my problem with game magazines at the time in print was that the minute you do one, someone wants a subscription. And you have to actually write about facts. Now, opinions I can write about because opinions don't have to be fact-checked. You can be totally wrong. And narrative and fiction I can write because you can write whatever you want. You know what I mean? You could write shitty fiction, but you can't write wrong fiction, you know, factually incorrect fiction. It's kind of inherent in the genre. Just alternative history at that point.
Right. So I was like, what if I have a game magazine that had like a story built into it? So the magazine, you know, component was really just a way for me to do some of these Game Fan layouts that I know how to do. And I can try to make some money back from this knowledge. Like I had this knowledge and I didn't know what to do with it. It's basically it. And I was like, I just don't want that to be a waste of like a dark hole in my life. And so I pitched this idea, and, you know, we raised about 13 grand, and I have the money sitting in a bank account. You know, to this day, losing interest every year. And with Brexit, you lose another 20% off something, you know, but, and I had to go and learn how to write a story and learn how to draw in a production manner and figure out how to merge a novel with a game magazine, which I don't know if you've looked around, but that kind of doesn't exist. You know,
I've never seen to do something like that before. It's crazy.
And it's been 3 years and I still tell people about this and they go, everyone looks at me like, what? You know, like, like I assure you it's all the stuff's written. The layouts are in there. I'm working on storyboarding now and just ramping. Like I'm ramping up on there's actual little, how do I say, during the novel sections, there's comic book panels that look like storyboards. So I'm able to put some comic book flavor into it while having a novel, because some people just want to look at pictures. Some people just want to read magazines. Some people don't want to read any magazine, you know? And so it's been this learning process, you know, of, and I've been streaming every bit of it, you know, for 3 years, like Game Cave Dev. Here's everything in real time. There's maps, there's game layouts there. I mean, and the magazine's broken up into 4 parts of Game Cave was a magazine that exists in their universe for 30 years, and they import Earth games into their universe. So for their universe, they've had like a Dave Halverson, who I call Rad Masters. They've had a guy who's been doing this successfully for 30 years. Like, it's always worked, you know, like, and because he's the only one on his planet who has these games. And they all play virtual reality games. So these retro games in their universe appeal to a certain audience who can't play virtual reality games, which are monsters. They can't go into VR. They don't. Their minds don't. It don't work. So he has this giant built-in audience. It all works. And this is like the story of how he ends up fucking that up, because I know that story well. And so, but the excerpts are from all the glory years. And so I was able to break magazines, my love of game magazines, down to 4 distinct eras: Nintendo Power, Game Fan, Play, and my idea what a game magazine could be, which was Game Fan 2010 and beyond. So I linked those into very key areas. So the first era of Game Cave was very Nintendo Power based. It was all about magazines at the time were about strategy guide kind of like stuff, like info, strategy guides, maps, tips. And then Game Fan era was based around lots of screens, opinions, buyer's guide mentality. Kind of came into the mix, you know, like, here's, you know, your choices. What choices do you do? With Play, it would, like, they removed the scores in Play magazine. People forget that. So for me, it was about like simplicity of design, big screens, you know, bold color choice, big fonts, little amount of text, straight to the point. I love this game. Here's why you should get it. Maybe here's why, you know, you shouldn't get it, because there isn't enough content. It was always kind of too positive, you know, like, you know, the problem with this game is there isn't more of it. Ha ha ha. You know, like, that's not an actual negative point, but okay, there was no scores, just positive and negatives. And then with Game Fan and beyond, my point, my idea was like mixing art books, moleskin journals, scrapbooking, and nostalgia all wrapped into one. And so it's like 4 distinct game magazine flavors built into a novel. And yeah, that's taken me 3 years to figure out how to do and build. And sometime between now and, I had said this summer, but it looks looking more like between now and winter, you know, I'll have it done and shipped, and they can leave me alone. The 100 people who bag me will get their thing, and it will be amazing. And I'll be like, thank you for being patient, because they've been really patient. You know,
that's a super ambitious project, though, man. Like I said, I've never heard of anyone doing something like that before, but it's such an original thing. For me, I think that's wild. And I love the idea.
And all the stories are figured out. All the character arts. I have all 30 years of Game Cave worked in and designed. Every issue, cover. It's all there. Like, it's like, so if you said, when you read it and you're like, hey, why did this happen? I know why it happened. I'm 10,000 years of Game Cave history are all worked out. Like, I've done nothing but just do that. And on top of actually writing it. So I got to go update this guy after we're done. But that being said, this is the cover that we settled on for the roughie. This is it. So all these little highlights, by the way, are just glow layers in Photoshop. So in Photoshop, if you double click a layer, you can get it in effects property window, and you can set glows. And so when you paint in there, anything you paint in there will have a color and a glow specifically. So I can just do that quickly and create these little faux rim lights without actually airbrushing a ton of glows in. So I can pick the pink from this moon here this way, and then I can pick this teal cooler color, this greener color, to push them back a little bit. And then I send it off to you for approval, and then you go, it's amazing. And that was a hard sell.
Totally good. Yeah. So you sent it to me. You sent it to me. And I was like, holy shit! And then I immediately sent it to the rest of the guys, and everyone was just like, oh my god, this is perfect. This is, I mean, it was even better than what we were imagining, honestly. But I knew, man. I've seen your work, and I knew once we talked and we kind of figured out what the direction we wanted to go. I was like, I know that Rob is going to come through with something super badass, and for that was never a concern of mine. But when you sent it to me, I was like, man, this is perfect. This is exactly the type of cover that we're going to want for our launch issue. It's going to set it up awesome.
And when you first told me about Megavisions too, I told you, I'm like, do not do what I'm doing with GameFan. Do not make GameFan like with billions of. I mean, really, and not to say that that wouldn't work, but on an iPad it wouldn't work anyway. You know, like you had a clear vision, and I was like, it reminds me of Play, and I think like that formula really. I'm like, that's the formula you do. You know, like that's
Right.
smart. You know, and it looks good,
Mm-hmm.
and it fits. So Megavisions to me, you know, like if I have any hand in, you know, what I'm doing, like the feeling that I get, you know, from it is like the digital version of the Play magazine, you know, but focused on Sega and all the different 8-bit from, you know, whatever bit we consider ourselves, VR bit, right? Like VR bit now. Yeah, you know, mobile bit, VR bit. We just remove the numbers and start talking about, you know, motion control bit was around 2005, 2009, you know. So, but I'm looking forward to this. I'm sure you guys will meet your funding, and then we'll have about 5 more covers to do after that. I think that's the thing
we'll have
too.
5 more. Yep.
That was the other thing too. I pitched to you doing all the covers. So the
because my original idea was it was originally we were going to have a different artist do each one to have kind of a different style. But after talking to you, you really sold me on the idea. It didn't take much, but you know, one of your points was like you want a consistent style that has you know, a similar feel and theme throughout all 6 issues, you know. And after talking with you about that, I really got what you're going for, and I really liked it.
If you look at the first 12 issues of Nintendo Power, they had a consistent tone. So the layout, GameFan had a consistent tone.
Yeah,
I think one of the mistakes I saw, a mistake, but just from a design thing, you know, when you put all 6 covers of like Retro Magazine together, yeah, it's a different artist, but I don't know what the magazine says.
Right.
You know, and I sort of feel like, well, whatever happens after this, good luck, you know. But I mean, I know like I know it's going to take you a minimum of 3 to really zero in on what you're doing. Like whatever you have now, it's way more than we had when we did GameFan. You know, I don't fucking know what I'm doing. So you actually have like an actual feel. But by the time you get around the 3rd or 4th issue, you're really going to know what you're doing, you know?
Yeah.
And that cover art, since I kind of already know what I'm going to do with it, you know, we'll just link them all together. And I just feel like with those 6 issues, you're going to get a solid, you know, a solid piece. Like when I go to the Sega Nerds site, I mean, one thing I was looking at your site on my mobile thing, I'm like, hey, this thing actually works on the phone. It's nice. But you guys have a tone, you know, the color, the blue, the orange, the white, you know, the way the fonts look, it all fits. And I gotta say, man, like if people think that shit's easy, go look at some weird sites that are all broke, you know, like
right on. Yep.
Even Nintendo's E3 page is weird. It does this weird pixelation thing that doesn't exactly, I don't know, I can't control. It's just, sometimes you're like, what were they thinking? I don't understand.
You're supposed to use a Wiimote to control the mouse.
Is that it?
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, okay. I believe it because I was confused.
That sounds like such a Nintendo thing that they would do, though.
Yeah. So.
No, man, this is gonna be awesome. We've had nothing but positive feedback about the cover so far. We are working out a way to add a tier where people are going to be able to get a print of the cover. And actually going forward, one of our plans are to sell prints of these on our website. So you'll be able to go and get a print of each of these covers that Rob is doing, and you'll be able to frame them, put them on your wall, do whatever you want with them. But it's gonna be really neat. So we're still trying to work out the details as far as for this Kickstarter, but we have some cool plans in the works on how we can get you guys some early cover art for this first issue, and so more to come on that. But yeah, we just appreciate everyone who's been sharing the Kickstarter on social media, telling everybody about it, posting it on forums, on Facebook, Twitter, and everyone who supported us so far. We're almost to the to be 50% funded. Hopefully we'll be able to hit that by the end of the day, and we still have about 18 days to go. And so it would be great if we could push through, our goal and go beyond that. It'll allow us to do some other stuff. We're still kind of talking about some other ways of getting the magazine out beyond just digital. So we're still kind of looking at that. One of the big things people keep asking about is, print. But that's a tough thing to do, man. Like when you're trying to just launch a magazine, especially just on Kickstarter with, a limited, the reality is it's kind of a niche thing. I mean, we're a Sega focused magazine, and so we're just trying to keep it grounded in reality and build this magazine. We don't want it just to say, okay, we're gonna launch a physical magazine and we raise maybe 20,000 or 30,000, however much it costs. So we got that, but what happens the next year? After that,
And
we want to
paper
build
supply
this thing.
goes up, right? Shipping
Exactly.
goes up.
Mhm.
15 grand of it go, 5 grand of it goes to VAT taxes for the overseas guys.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like after because we really, no kidding, did our research and we were looking at going print, and it just didn't seem like the smart way to go to build a sustainable magazine. And so our idea is just to try to build the readership and build this magazine to something that can sustain itself. And then when or if it makes sense to go print, we'll look at that. But right now we're focused on this digital version, and I promise you, once you get your hands on the tablet version, or the zero issue, which we hope to get out there here in the coming couple weeks, I think everyone's going to be excited about it. We got nothing but really great feedback. We're at too many games. We had our iPad out there. People were able to flip through it and actually touch and feel the magazine, and I think at that point they got what we're getting at with this magazine. Is not just your normal PDF style digital magazine. It's something more, and it's something different than what a lot of people have seen before. And we're going to be able to make this magazine come to life in a way that they haven't seen any other Sega magazine do before. So I'm super excited about it. I'm more than I'm so excited to have you on board with us, Rob, to be able to handle these covers, just because I know that's something that I don't even have to worry about. We pitch an idea for a cover, you and I work through it, and then I know that's for the most part that's all I have to worry about at that point, because you got that squared away, so I can focus on with inside the magazine, the content and that side of things. So it's awesome to have you on board with us, and you just give the magazine that much more credibility. And I think people, when they see this, they're like, man, this thing is super legit. We've had nothing but, awesome comments on Kickstarter so far and on social media. So it's awesome, man. I'm really excited about this.
Well, I really appreciate it. And I want people to know too, I'll sign off on this, is I don't need more stuff to do. Like, I just want everyone to know I'm not looking for freelance work. I'm at a position now, within a month or so, Game Cave will be my full-time job. So I just don't need extra shit to do. That being said, when I saw what you were proposing, when I saw what you're trying to build, it looked like something that I was trying to be a part of 10 years ago almost. Like just a digital version of that. And you guys have your heads on really, really well. And I said, well, opportunities come at inopportune times. Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to have anything there's always something you got to do on the side here and there. You don't have an aggressive print schedule. It's every other month. So why not? You know what I mean? Like, why not go out there and be a part of something that I was like, I would legitimately, I would back and pay for this. So why would I not want to be a part of it too? And, mm-hmm. And so I just want people to know that, I can't say whether you're going to be rich and famous, but I know you're going to make something that's worth the price, people are paying for. No problems.
Yeah. So that's the biggest thing is, man, I just want everyone that either, buys a single issue or subscribes to us. I want them to walk away from that and be like, you know what, that was money well spent. And they came away like having some, awesome entertainment and information. And hopefully, everyone that reads the magazine learns something too, because that's one thing that we really want to do is just have content in there that's not just the same stuff regurgitated that they've seen for the past 25 years. And like, okay, it's a Sonic 1 review. How many times have you seen Sonic 1 reviewed in a game? We're going to be doing, we want to focus on stuff that hasn't been told before, Sega's history that hasn't been told before, and from people that, that you really haven't heard tell it, or stories that you haven't heard told before. And so that's really what we're kind of delving into with this magazine. And we want, people to be educated about whether it's a certain game series or even just about Sega's history and lineage through the years,
Yeah, or just be able to sit here and wax for an hour while I sketch away and we talk about how things got made and the state of games. I mean, which just isn't being done in traditional print anyway. So
yeah,
you're already doing something fresh and funky.
That's awesome.
All right.
Man, I'm really happy that we were able to sit here and watch this thing come to life, because that was really cool, and I think our backers are really going to enjoy it too. I'm really interested to see kind of where it kind of goes from here. I know Greg Johnson; he's been messaging me throughout. He really likes the art, and it's
I
awesome to have
appreciate
him with
that.
us. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I
It's not
really
every day we get to do a podcast where we're building a cover of a magazine, and the creator of the game that we're basing it on is watching it and kind of live commenting. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And that's an experience, like you just can't pay for.
Mhm.
You can't, and you can't get it when you work in a traditional system. I mean, if this was being done for like a big publisher like a Warner or a Viz Media, or sorry, Ziff Davis, whatever,
Right.
you can't do this. They would not want you to show until it's already out.
Hmm.
And then it's like, and then it kind of gets lost in this. I don't know. There's something about anticipation. You can show movies ahead of time. You can show posters for movies ahead of time, and it doesn't seem to ruin the. Well, I can't see that movie now. I saw the poster. I don't know if it's effective. It should make you want to go see it, right?
Yeah.
More than waiting. So I don't know,
Oh,
man.
absolutely.
It's interesting. So I really appreciate that. And again, thanks for hanging out and for supporting me. And I'm gonna get back. I gotta go tell this guy why he doesn't follow the game cable. Oh, also, folks, if you want to follow me, sketchcraft.com is my YouTube channel. I do a podcast 2 or 3 times a week, plus real-time videos, speed videos, art tip videos. I do talk about gaming once a week, usually on Fridays. I'm going to be talking about Nintendo and E3 this week because I gotta rant, and
Ooh.
I just do that for fun. I don't do it to be snarky or to get a bunch of views. I get no views actually. So join me in my minimal viewership, but I every view counts. That's how I see it. And
That's right.
You can find me there daily.
You're always putting out awesome content. I see it all the time on YouTube, so I do subscribe to you, and it's good stuff, man. Like I said, you're working at all hours of the night. It's crazy. Your schedule is wild, but you're always putting out content, man. Like I woke up super early. I think it may have been this morning. I woke up. I go down on my Xbox. I start flipping through the my YouTube, and it shows SketchCraft is live streaming. I was like, holy shit, man! This guy, he's always on. He's always doing. You're always doing something. That's awesome. You're working really hard, and it's awesome to work with you. We'll have to do this again here soon, maybe for the next issue or something like that. We can make it kind of a habit of it. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely, not a problem.
Cool. All right, man. It's been good having you. Everyone go out, Kickstarter, go to Kickstarter.com, search for Megavisions. You'll be able to find the project there. You can also follow us on Twitter. It's at MegavisionsMag. Facebook, it's facebook.com/Megavisions. And you can check out our website as well, megavisionsmag.com. All right. Take it easy. We'll see you next time.